Hello, everyone. Welcome to our AURES 2 workshop on the impact of auctions on the renewable energy sector. It's part of our AURES 2 project, Auctions for Renewable Energy Support 2. So my name is Vasilis Anatolitis from Fraunhofer ISI. I'm the project coordinator, and I will start by introducing you briefly on our project. So Auctions for Renewable Energy Support 2, our project is supported by the Horizon 2020 framework, and it runs from November 2018 to October 2021. As I already mentioned, it's coordinated by us at Fraunhofer ISI in Germany. And our consortium consists of 11 institutions from 6 EU member states, and unfortunately not counting in the UK anymore, but we still have them on board. So as you can see, our consortium consists of several universities, consultancies from the private sector, and combined, we form quite a good and excellent, from my point of view, consortium to tackle this topic of renewable energy auctions. So we have 3 core objectives. First, we want to generate and communicate new insights on the applicability, performance, and effect of specific auction designs in the sector of renewable energies. Then we want to provide tailor-made policy support for different types of auction applications. So basically, we're working together with the governments in the European Union and help them to design their auctions, the renewable energy auctions properly. And last but not least, we want to facilitate the knowledge exchange between various stakeholders, of which this workshop is part of. Just to give you a very brief look into what we actually produce. So we want to inform the discussion on renewable energy auctions. Thus, we have published so far 16 country case studies. We have a regularly updated AURES 2 auction database with the auction results from the renewable energy sector, renewable energy auctions in the European Union. We have several policy briefs. We always publish some reports on current topics, research papers, but we conduct as well stakeholder workshops and the country case cooperation that I already mentioned, together with, in this, for example, Austria, Denmark, Germany, and Hungary. So that's it from my side. I would give the word to Pablo Del Rio from CICIG, who is actually organizing and is the moderating today's workshop. Pablo?
Okay, well, thanks a lot, Vasily. Welcome, everybody. Good morning. I'm Pablo Del Rio from the National Research Council of Spain, CICIG. We have a tight agenda today, this will basically consist of 3 presentations. The first one will be on auctions and renewable energy communities by Ana Mazo from Lighthouse Navigant. Then we will look at the impact of auctions on some aspects of the supply chains provided by Craig Menzies from Factor, and then I will talk myself about the impact of auctions on technological innovation. And after that, we can have a discussion, questions and answers, comments. Those will be very, very much welcome. We are, as Vasily said, facilitating knowledge exchange with the stakeholders is one of the dimensions of these projects. So, you know, this actually covers very much this aspect. So I will, yeah, this is the agenda for today. Okay, well, I mean, the workshop will be recorded and published without the question and answer session. And of course, you can make questions. You are very much welcome to do that. If you have any, please, you have 2 options. One is our preferred option. This option is that you type your questions in the question box, but you can always click on the raise your hand button in the software as well. So you can do any of them, but we prefer that you type your questions. On the other hand, there will be, I mean, if you have any content related questions, this will be answered after each presentation. And the broader questions in the dedication will be addressed in the dedicated discussion session. So you can of course make any of those type of questions, but please reserve the broader questions to the questions and answer session. Well, this is it for me for the moment. Thanks a lot for being there, and we'll start with Anna Mazo presentation from the Guidehouse on auctions on renewable energy communities. Thanks a lot, Anna.
Thanks, Pablo, and good morning and welcome also from my side to this online seminar. You may be asking, why are we talking about energy communities and auctions? Well, auctions create a market for renewable support, but we observe that if no signals or measures are provided to support projects with energy community attributes, the market alone is unlikely to provide these projects on its own. At the same time, we see the recast. Yes?
You have the control.
Yes. Yeah, I have control, yeah. At the same time, we see that the recast of the Renewable Energy Directive requires member states to consider the characteristics of these market actors when designing support schemes. So let me now share 5 key takeaways from our report. First, we see that energy communities can take many forms and strive for different objectives. Some of them strive for social acceptance, local ownership, or actor diversity. Definitions are important to target these supportive measures to energy communities, but experience shows compliance evaluation can be cumbersome. We see that, for example, when there's a high incentive there's a high incentive of these measures, it can lead to, for example, as in Germany's experience, for it to be very difficult for authorities to prevent non-intended projects to benefit from these measures. We see that definitions that are maybe broader, such as defining community involvement criteria, might provide an alternative and require less, let's say, administrative effort from the authorities checking the requirements in the auction. Our second key takeaway is that auction risks are faced by all actors, but they pose a strong challenge to energy community developers due to their smaller or limited project portfolio and size. In the slide, you see the risks are classified, before the auction and after the auction. In the pre-development stage, these challenges can include securing funding for the project development work or the bid bond before you have secure a support contract. Also, these energy communities can have challenges in dealing with the risk of not being awarded or in spreading the sunk costs due to their typical small portfolio. They may also face the challenge in calculating the right bid level, since information on the market and the competitions is less available to energy community developers with few projects to get this information from, compared to more experienced project developers. Also, after the auction, if there's a commissioning delay, a small single project energy community developer may not have the portfolio to spread the impact of the financial cost of this penalty on other projects that are built on time. Third key takeaway is that measures within the auction to support energy communities can facilitate participation, but they come at the compromise of market distortion. These measures include preferential auction rules, a bonus or quota, or a different pricing rule. Preferential auction rules can mitigate the risk of not being awarded or allocation risk as well as the financial penalty risk in case of non-compliance with the realization deadline. A different pricing rule also, such as using uniform price instead of pay as bid, can help address for these actors the price risk since they get the highest auction price awarded. Germany implemented these two types of auction rules by exempting energy communities from getting a building permit, giving them longer realization deadlines and access to uniform price rules. France used a bonus or quota available to certain project developers that met local financial participation requirements in their project, and this allowed these actors to, because of the expected extra revenue, to submit more competitive bids into the auction. Our experience shows that preferential rules making projects at different project development stages compete should be avoided because of the distortion they create. They increase the risk of non-realization because of a higher risk of a winner's curse, let's say of projects at early stages not having sufficient information to place cost-covering bids, as well as a lower cost for these actors of late or non-compliance in terms of project commissioning. Our fourth key takeaway is that measures outside of the auction, such as the guarantee fund implemented in Denmark, help address energy community actors, the risk, the financing risk, securing funding to do pre-development work and pay for the bid bond, help address this financial risk as well as the allocation risk. They also interfere less with the auction compared to preferential treatment measures or the exemption from these actors in the auction. However, we do see from the experience in Denmark that the uptake of this measure depends on how high the guarantee, how high the funding is that you make available to these actors. But in general, they show limited effectiveness in reversing a trend toward actor consolidation, particularly in technology segments such as offshore wind. The question remains how to then support these actors. Some policymakers may consider accepting energy communities from participating in auctions, and this has been the case so far, for example, for projects of rather smaller sizes. But then this comes at the compromise. You're reducing the effect of the auction and efficiently allocating support to your broad renewable energy market. A compromise solution that is being considered in some countries has been as accession mechanisms, which is to grant access to energy communities to the auction outcome without them having to participate in the auction, and the associated risks that we discussed come when they actually have to participate in the auction. Examples of these can be found in Spain and in Greece. Spain is considering the implementation of a quota that for this renewable energy, for energy community projects, that is tied to the auction result. However, for the auction taking place tomorrow, this is not this will not yet be implemented, but it is part of the local regulatory framework to consider the characteristics of these actors in the design of the support scheme. In Greece, they also, between 2019 and April this year, they have granted a feed-in tariff that is tied to the average of the past 3 auction rounds, plus a markup to energy community projects, and that will be the case until this year. And maybe let me wrap up by saying that this is, yes, a compromise solution, but when designing, it should be done carefully. because you still have the challenge of finding an appropriate legal definition for energy community projects, and the overall incentive of, let's say, defining project-based, defining these sectors based on project encourages your market to develop more small-scale projects, which in general, can be less, cost-effective projects compared to larger ones that can, through economies of scale, place a more competitive bid. And with that, I would like to wrap up. And please submit your questions in the chat, and looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Well, thanks a lot. Thanks a lot, Ana. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Pablo. I'm just changing.
No, I was just going to say, well, first of all, thanks, Ana. I was just going to say that some of the results that are being provided today are already published in the AURES 2 website. This includes a report on renewable energy communities, and also the one that Craig is going to talk about. And another one is coming on technological innovation and auctions. But this is it. Well, now is your turn, Craig? If please go ahead.
Here you go. I guess you should have control now.
Okay, many thanks, Pablo and Vasily. And good morning, everyone. Welcome to the workshop. Let me see if I can change the slide. Yes, okay, great. So yeah, good morning. My name is Craig Menzies. I'm working in the energy department of Factor, which is a consultancy firm based primarily in Spain, working on renewable energy and climate change projects. So yeah, it was a great pleasure to be part of work package task 4.2, which is the empirical analysis of the impact of auctions on renewable energy supply chains. Effectively, the study focuses around analysing the impacts of auctions and auction design elements on two aspects of market concentration. So really focusing the study on market concentration, particularly related to looking at the number of firms and the diversity of firms within two segments of renewable energy supply chains, namely the project development segment and the component manufacturing segment. Effectively, we look at, on the one hand, the impact of auctions themselves and design elements on the number and diversity of these firms. And on the other hand, we look at the sort of relative impact of auctions as compared to other factors that are likely to impact the market concentration, seen as the number and the diversity of firms. It's an empirical analysis. It's worth pointing out that it's really the first time, to our knowledge, that this has been undertaken for renewable energy supply chains and examining the impacts of auctions and design elements on this. So it's worth pointing out that there's not a sort of preceding literature around this, and it's really a first attempt to examine this topic in an empirical way. We analysed the following design elements. Obviously, with auctions, there are a large range of design elements that could be looked at. But in terms of making the project manageable and feasible with the methodology that we used, we had to focus in on, let's say, the design elements that we consider to be most important, in terms of their possible impacts on market concentration in the two value chain segments. So you can see them there. These are the ones that we really analysed. So the methodology that we used, as I mentioned, is it's really the first, to our knowledge, the first time that this study has been undertaken, an empirical analysis of the impact on supply chains. So we opted to use a structured interview methodology, basically an expert elicitation process, which is effectively the best option that was available, given that there is no large set of panel data available that we could have, under other circumstances, dipped into to make this empirical analysis. So expert elicitation was the way that we undertook the study. We effectively interviewed a series of experts within 4 countries. These experts were chosen based on their extensive knowledge of the renewable energy sector. For example, their involvement in participating in auctions or the design of auctions, or as experts within the sector analysing. Effectively, with the expert elicitation process, we selected between 6 and 12 experts within each of the countries that we looked at, and subjected them to a very structured expert elicitation interview process. As I mentioned, we focused on these 2 stages of the value chain: project development, component manufacturers. We focused on 4 technologies, and we selected 4 countries. The 4 countries were selected based on getting a geographical diversity, let's say, so Spain, the UK, Peru, and South Africa. But they were also selected because of the technological aspect. So, for example, in the UK, we focused on offshore wind, which is a very good case study for offshore wind, given the development in that sector, in that country. In Peru, we focused on onshore wind and solar PV. Spain, it's onshore wind and solar PV as well. And in South Africa, it's also solar PV, onshore wind, but including also concentrated solar power. So we were aiming to get a range of countries in the international setting, and also to cover a range of technologies to try to understand whether there were any specific differences. Quick rundown of the methodology that we used in the expert elicitation process. The interview structure was effectively based around three parts. So the first thing was expert self-assessment, followed by a series of structured questions around context factors related to renewable energy auctions, understanding of auctions and design elements. And then the main part of the interview itself was around the renewable energy auction design elements, and really drilling down on the details of their possible impacts on market concentration in the project development and component manufacturing segments of the value chain. So we used effectively a Likert scale approach. Between 0 and 10, experts were asked to rate to select a value between strong decrease or strong increase in terms of impact on the number of organisations in the sector, or the diversity. And by diversity, we simply refer to the size of firms, given that that's quite a valid sort of measure. International context. For example, it's used quite frequently by IRENA and also in renewable energy directives. So qualitative explanations of why they chose certain numerical responses. So just a quick rundown, we interviewed 33 experts across the 4 countries. You can see there that we tried to capture a sort of spread of experts from different backgrounds, from academia, sector experts, government, and industry representatives. So that, for example, could be project developers themselves or component manufacturers themselves. A bit of a spread there across the 4 countries. And the interviews were undertaken in the spring and early summer of last year. So, okay, so that was the methodology. You get a much more detailed description in the report itself, but into the results. Seems I've jumped forward to see if I can go back. Okay, into the results. Yeah, so there was auctions and auction design elements with a marked effect on the number and diversity of project developers and component manufacturers, as we tentatively expected at the outset of the project. There is quite a lot of evidence from the process that we undertook, showing that certain design elements have very significant impacts, it would seem, on market concentration, whereas others are far less marked in their effect. Design elements tend to affect the value chains of four considered countries in quite similar ways. Not exactly similar. There were some geographical differences at the country level. I won't go into them in this presentation for reasons of brevity, but within the report you can see the differences there. But overall, there were quite similar trends that we observed. However, there are substantial technology and country differences in line with the idea that impact is renewable energy technology specific and to some extent country specific. So this was interesting. In the interviews themselves, as I mentioned, we also asked the experts to qualify their responses with background information. So it was very telling to see why they considered certain design elements and certain aspects of auctions to affect market concentration in different ways. At that level, we saw some differences between countries, which, as I suggest, please do read through the report and see them. That's related to the different stages of development of the renewable energy technologies themselves. So, for example, the different dynamics and development of the offshore wind sector in the UK, for example, compared to other sectors which are at quite a different stage of development. For example, the solar PV sector in Spain. So, some quite interesting dynamics going on there. And let's jump ahead. Here on this graph, what we're showing is the sort of amalgamated results.
2 more minutes.
Thanks, Vasily.
For the information.
Thank you. Yeah, amalgamated results across the four countries. So as I mentioned, overall, we see that certain design elements appear to induce very substantial impacts, whether large increases or decreases on the numbers and diversity as the size. So these two proxies of market concentration. These design elements that tend to have the biggest effect relate to the frequency of auctions. So that's how frequently are they occurring. Also auction schedules. So that's by that we refer to the extent to which auctions have a clear timetable published officially, made public, so that the sector can get sight of that and start planning around how to plan internally at a business level and so on. That was something that came back very consistently as an absolutely critical driver of the impact on market concentration. On the other end of the spectrum, in terms of the direction, strength of influence of design elements that tend to decrease the number and diversity of actors in the project development and component manufacturing sectors. The ones that decrease them tend to be related to the pre-qualification requirements on the bidders themselves, and then therefore, which can to a certain extent be passed up the chain to project developers and to a slightly lesser extent to component manufacturers. So these pre-qualification requirements related to financial, material, previous experience, and so on. When these requirements are particularly strict and stringent, we see this effect that it can have this effect of reducing the number of component manufacturers and project developers in the segment. Also worth pointing out as well that the project developers tend to be, to a larger extent, more affected or more exposed, let's say, to the certain design elements as compared to component manufacturers, which tend to be slightly more sort of shielded. And in these graphs, you can see that the sort of light blue coloured bars are for project developers and the red ones for component manufacturers. Also worth pointing out that in the middle there are certain design elements which effectively seem to have a neutral impact. Some experts said that they were slightly positive, others said slightly negative, but so to a certain extent they sort of appear to cancel each other out. Overall findings, I'll wrap this up in 30 seconds, I suppose we're against the clock. Here, what I really want to just show is that at the country level, we asked the experts whether they thought auctions themselves as compared to other measures such as administratively set remuneration, on the one hand, as compared to context factors, as compared to the particular option design elements themselves. We asked them, what is the most important thing in terms of the driver for the number and diversity of project developers and component manufacturers? Here we can see the chart at the right there, quite a diversity in terms of what the experts seem to think is the most important driver of market concentration. For example, in the UK, there's a lack of consensus about whether options themselves, the design elements, or context factors are the most important driver. And in certain other countries, the picture's a lot clearer. I'll wrap it up there. I would recommend you, if you have a chance, to please read the report, because it really does get into the detail about these different dynamics at the country level. It's quite interesting to see how they link with the stage of the different renewable energy sectors at the country level. And as a very last point, I would say that we should be slightly careful about taking conclusions from the specific to the general. So these results should be interpreted really at country level. Like I say, this is the first time, to our knowledge, this study has been done empirically, and it would be interesting to continue with it a little bit further. But at the moment, because the analysis was really focused at a country level on specific technologies, we would recommend to interpret those results in that context. Thanks very much for your time. Pass back to Pablo. Thanks.
Okay, thanks a lot, Craig. Okay, now I should take control of this thing.
Of course, 1 second.
Okay.
One
right.
second.
Yeah.
I think no. Now you should have it.
Yeah.
Yeah, looks good.
Okay, great. Okay, well, thanks a lot, Vasily. Now it's my turn. I will talk about an ongoing work which is about to be finalized this week, in fact, which is a very fascinating and also challenging topic, which is the impact of auctions on innovation, on technological innovation, indeed. So this is the index of my presentation. I know I have a tight time schedule, so I will go quite fast over this, and I expect your feedback as well. Okay, well, the aim of this task in this work package 4 is to cover a gap in the literature. It provides an analytical framework on the mechanisms which link diffusion-driven technological innovation and auctions and their design elements, and also to carry out a preliminary empirical analysis which allows us to identify the perception of key stakeholders on the topic. So it is based on theory and those perceptions, and based on that, some research proposals are provided. So I think that we are all aware that innovation is a critical component of the energy transition, and we're also familiar or aware that there is an important distinction between the stages of technological change, invention, innovation, and diffusion. In the past, technological change processes was seen in a rather linear way, going through the different stages in a sequential manner. However, in a seminal contribution on the chain-link model of innovation, more and more contributions acknowledge that feedbacks between stages are very relevant as drivers of the whole process and innovation in particular. It is traditionally mentioned also that innovation is influenced by both supply push instruments, for example, public R&D investments, and demand pull instruments. These demand pull instruments are mostly deployment support, for example, feed-in tariffs, for example, auctions, for example, credit certificates. So our point is that if there are feedbacks from diffusion, innovation, and invention, then deployment support would have effects on innovation. It is the main critical point on on this on our starting point. I have to say that the literature, I mean, in order to identify our motivation, well, the literature on the comparative effects of auctions and auction design elements compared to other instruments is very tiny. I would have to say that the impact of auctions and auction design elements on innovation has been rather an unexplored topic. So given this lack of research, of previous research on the topic, and even the absence of an analytical framework, and also taking into account the qualitative character of the topic, we decided to go for an exploratory analysis, which is based on a review of the literature and also an exchange of views on the main aspects, basically the variables, the relationship between variables with different types of stakeholders. Some interviews were carried out in a case study in Spain with the Spanish actors, which allowed us to complete our view on the relationships between the relevant aspects. So basically, we consider several design elements. None of these are similar to what Craig mentioned in his in the preceding presentation. We focus on the way to set the volume, on the schedule, on the frequency of the auction, on the diversity, technological, geographical, otherwise, on the existence of and the stringency of qualification, seller concentration rules, existence of local content rules, the remuneration type, the selection criteria, the auction formats, auction type, pricing rule, ceiling prices, the realization period, and the existence of minimum participating conditions here. So these are a broad array of design elements. Where our analytical framework, the analytical framework that we build is based on merging the insights from different approaches to identify the causal relationships and the causal mechanisms linking auctions and design elements with innovation. So the study idea is that there are several determinants of diffusion-related or diffusion-driven innovation in renewable energy technologies. How auctions either activate those determinants of technological innovation or are barriers to them, how design elements in auctions activate those drivers, and what is the relevance with respect to other factors driven innovation are all crucial issues that we explore in this task. We have, by reading the literature, we have noticed that there are several innovation mechanisms from diffusion, learning effects, which are directly related to diffusion of the technology through mostly post-adoption innovation improvements, for example, learning by doing. Then we also have market creation. The idea is that equipment manufacturers are the actors who invest in R&D in the renewable energy sectors. So investments in R&D by these firms depend on the expectations on the future existence of a market where they can sell their products. In addition, R&D investments by manufacturers may depend on the existence of a producer surplus by project developers. The idea, basically, with respect to this mechanism, is that a squeezing of profits at the project development stage is likely to be transmitted to previous stages of the value chain, reducing the ability of manufacturers to innovate. Furthermore, competitive pressures in the project development stage inflicted by auctions be expected to induce competition between equipment manufacturers, and this would lead them to innovate, either to reduce the cost of their products and processes or to provide new or improved products. It should be taken into account that apart from auctions, there are other policy factors such as framework conditions, public investments in R&D, and non-policy factors which influence innovation. And isolating the effects of auction from the other factor is really quite a challenging task. Okay, we went through the literature about almost 90 papers, both the literature on the innovation effects of deployment support, and the so-called literature on technological innovation system. And basically what we found is what I just mentioned before, this very, very small, very, very tiny literature on the actual effects, comparative effects of auctions versus other instruments on innovation. And there is nothing on the different effects of different design elements on innovation. So basically, we ended up with not much, previous work on this topic. So this is why we have provided an analytical framework for the analysis of impact of auctions and auction design elements on innovation. We try to connect the impact of auctions on innovation through the impact on the aforementioned innovation mechanisms, and also taking into account the other factors, the other aspects. Oops, that's okay. So yeah, so well, this relatively complicated figure is basically summarizes our framework. The main assumption is that auctions affect innovation indirectly. That is to say, through their impacts on the R&D decisions of equipment manufacturers, who are the ones, as I said, investing in R&D. In the case of auctions, the relevant effects can be compared to their alternative. The alternative is administratively set remuneration in the form of feed-in tariffs or feed-in premiums. For design elements, the comparison is between different design options. So an initial assessment of the impact of auctions on innovation is performed, which is based on the vertical links between the different variables derived from theory and the literature review. You can see like the process over here in this slide. Yeah, coming back to this, actually, we see or we find that auctions are likely to lead to higher competitive pressure than administratively set remuneration, and this could be expected to increase the willingness to invest in R&D and thus lead to innovation. But on the other hand, this greater competitive pressure would lead to lower revenues and therefore profit margins. And in addition to these lower levels of profits, there would be lower levels of market creation, which would result from the quantity caps, the volumes action in auction. So together with the profit margins, this could be expected to influence negatively the R&D investment decisions of equipment manufacturers. Is their willingness, the ability to invest in R&D. You can see that there are opposing effects. This table mostly summarizes our analysis. So given the contradictory effects, it's difficult to tell a priori which would be the net effect. So this is probably an empirical issue. And also, we have to, we have to be aware that this innovation effect could happen for all the technologies, but they could be expected to be different for different types of technology. For example, for technologies with different maturity levels. In addition, I have to mention that this analysis has focused on the comparison of administratively set remuneration through feed-in tariffs or feed-in premiums and auctions in the past. But for the future, the appropriate comparison may not be between administratively set remuneration and auctions, but between auctions and lack of support. So the impact of different design alternatives on innovation can be analyzed a priori by identifying the theoretical effects of those alternatives on the different innovation mechanisms. A preliminary discussion on the possible influences of different design elements is provided in these tables. For this, we consider the design elements before. Well, of course, we cannot go through the details of this table. This will be provided in the report for this task, but it can be observed that not all design element categories can be expected to influence innovation in renewable energy technologies. And on the other hand, we can observe opposite effects, as I mentioned before, for most design elements, which could lead us to an unclear a priori result. This justifies empirical research on the topic. The above discussion allows us to infer a set of a priori research proposals, and these proposals are then shared with different types of experts in the field to check their correctness or possible omissions, or if they have comments in general. So first one is that auctions influence innovation through their impact on manufacturers and technology developers. And these innovation effects of auctions should be compared to other alternatives, whether it is administratively set remuneration in the past or lack of support for the future. The design of the auction, these different design elements, may affect innovation through several channels. These 4 channels are the ones I just mentioned before: market creation, profit margins, learning effects, and competition. So there may be opposing effects. Auctions can only be expected to be one of the factors influencing innovation. There are many other influences as well, and different design elements in auctions have different impacts on innovation. Okay, well, let's go with the methodology. So the purpose of the empirical analysis was to confirm the set of research proposals on the mechanisms linking auctions and innovation, and the relative importance of non-auction factors in driving innovation. So basically, in order to investigate the research question, we use qualitative case study research for 2 main reasons. On the one hand, this link has not yet been explicitly addressed in previous research. The focus of the study, therefore, was on identifying alternative causal mechanisms in order to build well-founded theory. And qualitative case studies are particularly well suited for fulfilling this task. On the other hand, case study research allows for the study of a phenomenon in quite high depth, greater depth than probably alternative methodologies. Well, most empirical contributions to the literature on the innovation effects of deployment policies focus on the macro, let's say, country level. They use panel databases in which patents are the dependent variable, and the results for several policies in several countries are compared. However, there has not been much focus on auctions in this analysis. In addition, there has not been much focus on the micro level decision of actors who are directly involved in renewable energy technology innovation. That is, equipment manufacturers. How the decisions of these actors are affected by different types of instruments and different design elements has not received attention. I think we have to zoom into that. I think it's very important to zoom into that. The focus on R&D investments compared to auctions, compared to patents, is justified given the focus on the micro level decision of firms who invest in R&D, and also due to the fact that there is a time lag between auctions and patent filings, and most auctions have occurred quite recently. So experts were consulted through a written questionnaire, which included the aforementioned propositions, asking them to identify the relevance of each aspect, and most importantly, the possible existence of missing variables or relationships. So a questionnaire to main experts familiar with the link between auctions and innovation in renewable energy technologies was sent. 19 experts completed the questionnaire and sent it back. I want to publicly thank those experts for answering the questionnaire. We are talking about very busy, high-level people with very tight agendas, so thanks a lot for doing that. Different types of experts were consulted, were contacted from technology platforms, renewable energy associations, etc. And the questionnaire focused on either renewable energy technologies in general or specific technologies. The questionnaire had 5 blocks. Well, apart from also the first one on the confidentiality clause, telling the objective and definition of technological innovation. The 4 main blocks were 1 to 4, comparative, where we asked about the comparative influence of auctions with respect to other policy options, influence of auctions on the deployment-related drivers of innovation, the impact of different design elements, and the influence of different factors on technological innovation in REDS. Okay, so going with the results of this, well, regarding block, it doesn't seem to work. Okay. Okay. Now, yeah, okay, going on with the results, I will go fast over this, but of course it is important. Regarding block 1 on the comparative influence of auctions with respect to other policy options, we can see that most interviewees believe that auctions in general provide an incentive to innovation with respect to administratively set remuneration. This is shown by this figure, where the numbers in the y-axis refer to the number of interviewees who have provided the respective answer, whether it's substantive incentive to innovate, mod incentive, and so on and so forth. However, this incentive is modest for many of those stating that such a policy impact exists. In addition, you can see that several interviewees believe that auctions discourage innovation. When interviewees were asked about the perceived influence of past auctions in Spain, we mean those conducted in 2016 and 2017, on technological innovation in renewable energy technologies in Spain, most argued that those auctions neither encourage nor discourage technological innovation. The rest of interviewees had rather opposing opinions in this regard, with balanced views on whether auctions encourage or discourage innovation. Whereas some argued that the auction would encourage innovation due to the stronger need to reduce costs, others mentioned that the auctions in Spain in 2016 and 2017 did not encourage innovation because the design was not favorable in this respect. Probably it was mentioned that they were conducted at short notice, they were priced only once, some technologies were not eligible to participate, or auctions had been conducted with relatively small or very small volumes, especially for the 2016 auction. Okay, well, finally, with respect to this block, when asked about the expected influence of future auctions on innovation with respect to the absence of support, there is agreement that auctions will encourage innovation in the next decade, although these impacts will be rather modest. Okay, regarding the block 2, we ask about the influence of auctions on the deployment-related drivers of innovation. Participants were asked to indicate the degree of agreement with some statements regarding the influence of auctions on those drivers: competitive pressure, profit margins, and market creation. This was done both with respect to administratively set remuneration and auctions, and compared to the absence of support. Okay. Well, regarding competitive pressure, there is a favorable opinion on the influence of auctions on innovation with respect to administratively set remuneration through the competitive pressure exerted on project developers, which encourage equipment manufacturers to innovate. Actually, some mentioned that this influence was mediated by the design, by the choice of some design elements. For example, the level of remuneration and their administratively set remuneration and auctions, the dispatch profile, and the system of a long-term schedule, and also it was dependent on framework conditions, such as long-term targets and the stability of regulation. These are specifically addressed in the next block. Okay, on the other hand, the experts agreed on the negative influence of auctions on competitive pressure with respect the absence of support, suggesting that auctions would not induce innovation as much as the absence of support in this regard. However, several interviewees also argued that without support, some renewable energy technologies could not compete with other technologies on the basis of market prices alone. And of course, this would have an impact on innovation. There were opposing views on the statement that R&D expenditures of manufacturers, which partly depend on the existence of profit margins, which can be reinvested in R&D by project developers, are negatively influenced by auctions. Almost the same number of interviews agreed and disagreed on such a statement, and some interviewees, in fact, neither agreed nor disagreed. In contrast, there was some agreement on the positive influence of auctions on innovation with respect to the absence of support through their impact on higher profit margins that can be reinvested in R&D. Therefore, auctions can be expected to influence technological innovation with respect to the absence of support, according to these views. And finally, for this block,
five more minutes.
Okay, thanks, Vasily. Regarding market creation, the interviews mostly seem to reject the existence of a market creation effect on technological innovation, that we expected beforehand. Actually, the views of interviewees seem to be highly divided with respect to the impact of auctions and lack of support through their effects on market creation. And we can see that this was much more divided types of opinions. Well, I think that the results from this second block broadly suggest that compared to administratively set remuneration, auctions are likely to have a positive impact on innovation, with a positive effect on the competitive pressure driver and the non-negative effect on the other two drivers. But with respect to the absence of support, auctions are unlikely to affect innovation significantly through any of these drivers. Of course, you should be aware that these are perceptions of 19 people, and of course, quantitative analysis, further quantitative analysis in the future should be performed. That's for sure, of course. Well, regarding block 3, the impact of different design elements, the question was here, which of the following design elements of auctions do you think would encourage a technological innovation in the respective renewable energy sector in Spain, in the respective renewable energy technologies in Spain? So basically what we can see is that the most influential design elements on technological innovation seem to be the stringency of qualification requirements, technological neutrality or technological specificity, the existence of a schedule of auctions, and highly frequent auctions. The interviewees were asked about other design elements which had not been considered in this list and which may have had a relevant impact on renewable energy technology innovation. There were no further additions to the list except one important one. Some of them stress that auctions should include elements which allow taking into account the indirect generation cost, profile, grid, and balancing, not only the LCOE, the so-called direct cost. Okay, and this is the last, well, almost the last slide. It regards block 4 on the influence of different factors apart from auctions, but also auctions on technological innovation in renewable energy technologies. Here the question was, which is the degree of influence of the following factors on technological innovation in renewable energy technologies in Spain? What you can see is that there was a widespread agreement that auction would have an impact on innovation, but this impact would be relatively small compared to other factors. Foreign demand for component manufacturing in Spain, which is not related to the organization of auctions, was related to have a considerable impact on innovation. This is in line with the importance attached to the factor international competition in a globalized sector, which is a main driver of technological innovation in renewable energy technologies. The importance of public investments, public R&D investments, was also perceived to be relatively high, or quite high, by the responders. And they also attach high relevance to public support, collaboration, and knowledge networks, support for technological platforms, for example. Also, the expected relevance of framework conditions, mostly the existence of long-term goals and stability, also shows in our analysis. Well, I think that overall the perception of the interviewees seem to suggest that auctions play a limited role in driving technological innovation compared to other factors, but this role is nevertheless important. It's not negligible, so to say. Okay, and this is the end of it. Coming to the conclusion, we conclude that the literature on the innovation effects of auctions is extremely tiny, virtually non-existent, up to our knowledge, of course. An analytical framework on the mechanisms linking diffusion-driven technological innovation and auctions under the same elements have been provided here. We have identified the perception of key stakeholders on the topic. Some research proposals to be investigated in further research have been put forward. This should be, as I said, investigated when data is available. There will be quite substantial methodological challenges in the future to carry this in-depth empirical analysis with quantitative data. Of course, this should be done, and we hope that the work provided in this task will also be the basis for those analyses in the future. So thanks for being there. I would like to know your views about this very complex theme. So please feel free to comment and add to the discussion. Thanks a lot, and it's for me.